My stepdad tried to ban me from my mom's funeral because he blames me for her death. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. This is going to be long, but I need to get this out, and I honestly don't know what to do anymore. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I stared at my phone for what felt like hours afterward, watching those glowing numbers blur through my tears. It was my stepdad, Richard, and the first words out of his mouth weren't, "I'm sorry," or "There's been an accident." They were, "This is all your fault." My mom was dead. Cardiac arrest in her sleep. She was only 52. But let me back up, because the whole story is so much more fucked up than that opening line suggests, and Reddit, I honestly don't know if I'm losing my mind or if my grief is making me see things that aren't there. My mom, Janet, married Richard when I was 16. I'm 28 now, so they'd been together for 12 years. At first, he seemed like a decent guy. He made my mom laugh. He had a stable job as an accountant, and after watching her struggle as a single parent for most of my life, I was genuinely happy she found someone. But Richard had this weird thing about being the man of the house. Like, from day one, he tried to establish himself as my authority figure, even though I was already driving and working part-time. He'd make comments about my curfew. I didn't have one, my job, perfectly respectable retail work, and my college plans, already sorted with scholarships. Thank you very much. My mom always played peacekeeper. He just wants what's best for you, honey. He's trying to be a father figure. Give him time to adjust. I tried. God, I really tried. But Richard had this way of making everything about him. When I graduated high school, his speech at the family dinner was about how proud he was of his family and how he'd guided me to success. When I got into college, he took credit for pushing me to apply myself. When I landed my first real job after graduation, he told people he'd taught me work ethic. The worst part? My mom ate it up. She'd beam at him during these speeches, nodding along like he'd actually been there for any of it. Like he hadn't shown up when the hard work was already done. The incident 2 years ago. Things really went to shit 2 years ago at Christmas. I was 26, living in my own apartment about an hour away, in a serious relationship with my now fiancé, Mike. I'd driven over for Christmas Eve dinner, and everything seemed normal at first. But then Richard started drinking. He wasn't usually a heavy drinker, but that night he was putting away the whiskey like it was going out of style. And drunk Richard was apparently very different from sober Richard. It started with small digs. Comments about how I never visited enough. I came over at least twice a month. How I was too good for family now, literally sitting at their dinner table. How my job in marketing was just playing with pictures on a computer. I'm a creative director at a mid-sized agency. Thank you very much. My mom kept shooting me these apologetic looks, but she wasn't saying anything to stop him. Just serving more potatoes and changing the subject. But then Mike excused himself to the bathroom, and Richard really let loose. "You know what your problem is?" he said, pointing his fork at me. "You're selfish. Always have been. Your mother bends over backward for you, and what do you give back? Nothing." I tried to stay calm. "Richard, I think maybe you've had enough too. Don't you dare tell me what I've had enough of in my own house." He was getting loud now. "You waltz in here with your fancy car and your college boyfriend, acting like you're better than us. But where were you when your mother was crying herself to sleep because she felt like she'd failed you?" That stopped me cold. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, you don't know?" He laughed, but it was ugly. "Your precious mother spends half her time worrying she wasn't good enough for you growing up. Worrying that working 2 jobs to keep you fed and clothed somehow damaged you. And instead of reassuring her, you just keep taking and taking and taking." I looked at my mom. She was staring at her plate, her face red. "Mom," I said softly. "Richard wasn't done. She wanted to ask you to help with the mortgage payments a few months ago when I was between jobs, but she was too proud. Said she didn't want to burden her successful daughter. So instead, we nearly lost the house while you were posting Instagram photos from your weekend trips." The room went completely silent. Mike had come back from the bathroom and was standing in the doorway, clearly sensing the tension. "Richard," my mom finally whispered, "please stop." But he was on a roll now. "And now you're engaged. And when's the last time you asked your mother what she thought about it? When's the last time you included her in any of your big life decisions? She's your mother, not some acquaintance you check in with when it's convenient. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, because some of what he was saying wasn't entirely wrong. I had been focused on building my own life. I did only call when I had news to share or needed something. I had known they were struggling financially. But the way he was saying it, the timing, the audience, it felt calculated. Like he'd been storing up ammunition for exactly this moment. You're right, I said quietly. I could be a better daughter. But this isn't the time or the place for this conversation, and you know it. When is the time? He shot back. When you deign to grace us with your presence next month. Next year? Your mother's not getting any younger, you know. And that's when I snapped. Are you seriously trying to guilt-trip me about my mother's mortality at Christmas dinner? What the hell is wrong with you? Don't you dare use that language in this house. It's not your house. I yelled back. It's Mom's house. She owned it before she met you, and she'll own it after. I stopped myself, but not fast enough. Richard's face went white, then red. After what? After I leave? Is that what you want? You want me gone so you can have your mommy all to yourself again? Richard, stop. My mom was standing now, her hand shaking. Both of you, just stop. But Richard wasn't stopping.
No, Janet.
She needs to hear this. Your daughter resents me, resents us, resents the fact that you found happiness with someone who isn't her father. She's never accepted this family, and she never will. That's not true, I said, but even as I said it, I wondered if it was. Isn't it? When's the last time you stayed overnight? When's the last time you called me by my name instead of just avoiding using any name at all? When's the last time you acknowledged that I'm part of this family too? And you know what? He was right about that stuff too. I did avoid staying overnight. I did avoid calling him anything because Dad felt wrong, but Richard felt too formal and I didn't know what the middle ground was. I did tend to phrase things as Mom and I rather than we when talking about family stuff. The fight ended with me grabbing Mike and leaving. My mom followed us to the door, crying, begging us to stay, saying she'd talk to Richard. I'm sorry, I told her. I'm so sorry, Mom. We'll figure this out, okay? Just not tonight. She hugged me tight, and I could feel her shaking. I love you so much, sweetheart. You know that, right? No matter what he says when he's been drinking, I love you exactly as you are. That was the last real conversation we had. The silent treatment. Over the next 2 years, things were weird. I tried to repair the relationship. I really did. I called more often. I sent flowers on Mother's Day with a long note. I invited them both to my engagement party. Richard declined. Mom came but seemed uncomfortable the whole time. I even sent Richard a birthday card that year, trying to extend an olive branch. But there was this coldness from him that I couldn't penetrate. He was polite when I visited, but distant. Like I was a stranger in his home. And my mom seemed caught in the middle, trying to keep everyone happy and just making herself miserable in the process. She lost weight over those 2 years. Started looking tired all the time. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd just say she was getting older and change the subject. I should have pushed harder. I should have paid attention to the signs. I should have made her go to a doctor when she started complaining about being tired all the time and having heartburn. But I was planning a wedding, dealing with work stress, and honestly, I was still hurt from that Christmas fight. I was still processing Richard's accusations and trying to figure out how much of my guilt was justified and how much was manipulation. So I didn't push. I just let it slide. The phone call. Which brings us back to that 3:47 a.m. phone call. This is all your fault, Richard said, and his voice was completely calm. Not hysterical with grief. Not broken with loss. Just matter of fact. What happened? I managed to ask. Your mother had a heart attack in her sleep. The paramedics said she'd been dead for hours by the time I found her. Still that same eerily calm tone. They want to do an autopsy to determine the exact cause, but her doctor said she'd been showing signs of heart disease for months. Heart disease? She never said anything about heart disease. She didn't want to worry you. You were so busy with your wedding planning and your important job. Even in that moment, even while processing the fact that my mother was dead, I could hear the accusation in his voice. Richard, The stress killed her, he continued. The stress of trying to hold this family together while you made it clear you wanted nothing to do with us. The stress of wondering if she'd failed you as a mother. The stress of watching you build a life that had no room for her in it. I couldn't breathe. That's not. I was planning to ask her to help with the wedding planning. I was going to. Were you?
When?
After you'd already made all the decisions? After you'd already excluded her from everything that mattered? I didn't exclude her.
I thought
we were working through things. I thought we had time. Well, you were wrong. And now she's dead, and the last 2 years of her life were spent worrying that her only child didn't love her anymore. I was sobbing by this point. Mike had woken up and was holding me, trying to figure out what was happening from my side of the conversation. Richard, please, I whispered. Can we not do this right now? She's gone, and I can't handle this right now. Neither can I. But the difference is, I don't have a choice. I have to handle the arrangements, the funeral, the legal stuff, all of it, while you get to go back to your life and pretend you were a good daughter. I want to help with the arrangements. I want to.
No. What?
I said no. I'm handling everything. Janet and I talked about this before she died, and she wanted me to take care of things. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I'm her daughter. I have a right to. You gave up your rights when you decided we weren't worth your time. The funeral is Friday at St. Mark's. 2 p.m. Don't come. And he hung up. I called back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried for hours, alternating between his cell phone and the house phone. Nothing. I drove over there that morning, but all the curtains were drawn and no one answered the door, even though I could see Richard's car in the driveway. I called the funeral home. They confirmed that arrangements had been made for Janet Miller, she'd kept her maiden name, for Friday at 2 p.m., but when I asked about helping with planning or paying for anything, they said that Richard Miller had specifically instructed them that he was the only authorized party. But I'm her daughter, I told them. I'm sorry, but we have to follow the instructions of the person who made the arrangements. I called a lawyer. She said that unless my mother had specifically designated me as next of kin or executor in a will, her husband had the legal right to make funeral arrangements as he saw fit. And that while I couldn't be legally barred from attending a funeral if it was on private property, like a church, the person who arranged it could potentially have me removed if I was disruptive. What if fine's disruptive? I asked. That would be up to the discretion of whoever's in charge. But I'd strongly advise against creating a scene at your mother's funeral, regardless of your legal rights. Wednesday and Thursday were a blur of phone calls to family members trying to get anyone to talk sense into Richard. My mom's sister, my Aunt Carol, was sympathetic but ultimately useless. He's grieving, honey, she kept saying. Maybe just give him some space for now and work things out after the funeral. He's trying to ban me from my own mother's funeral, Carol. This isn't grief. This is punishment. I know you're hurt, but I'm not hurt. I'm devastated. My mom is dead, and now the only person who can tell me what her final months were like, whether she was in pain, whether she knew how much I loved her, is refusing to speak to me because he's decided I'm responsible for killing her. That finally seemed to get through to her. He said that. In those exact words, there was a long pause. Let me call him, she said finally. Let me see what I can do. She called me back an hour later. He's not in a good place, sweetie. He's angry, and he's grieving, and he's not thinking clearly. But he won't budge on the funeral. I'm sorry. The day of Friday morning, I woke up and put on the black dress I'd bought for the funeral. Mike offered to come with me for moral support, but I was terrified that having him there would just give Richard more ammunition. Look at her, turning our tragedy into a date. I got to St. Mark's at 1:30 p.m., hoping that showing up early and being respectful would somehow smooth things over. The parking lot was already half full. I recognized some of the cars, family members, neighbors, my mom's coworkers. Normal people who were there to mourn a woman they cared about. I walked up to the church doors, and that's when I saw him. Richard, standing by the entrance in a black suit, greeting people as they arrived, playing the part of the grieving widower, accepting condolences and hugs. When he saw me, his whole demeanor changed. "I told you not to come," he said quietly, stepping away from the small group of people he'd been talking to. "She was my mother, Richard. I'm not missing her funeral. You missed the last 2 years of her life. What's one more day?" People were starting to stare. I could see my Aunt Carol approaching from across the parking lot, clearly intending to intervene. "Please," I said, trying to keep my voice low and calm. Can we just get through today? We can hash out our issues later, but right now I need to say goodbye to my mom." "Your mom spent her last months wondering why her daughter hated her. You want to say goodbye? You should have done that when she was alive to hear it." "I didn't hate her. I was losing the battle to keep my voice down. I loved her so much, and you know that. I'm just what? Telling the truth? Making you face what you did. What I did. I was full on shouting now. I was building a life. I was trying to be independent like she taught me to be. I was busy, yes, but I called her every week. I visited at least twice a month. You excluded us from everything that mattered to you. Because you made it clear I wasn't welcome. Because every time I came over, you found some way to make me feel like shit for not being the perfect daughter." Aunt Carol had reached us now, along with several other family members. Everyone was staring. "Please," Carol said, putting a hand on each of our arms. "This isn't what Janet would have wanted." Richard shook her off. "Don't tell me what my wife would have wanted. I lived with her. I saw her cry over this ungrateful brat more times than I can count." "You're lying," I said, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure. "Am I? Ask anyone who spent time with her these last 2 years. Ask Carol. Ask the neighbors. Ask anyone who actually cared enough to be around." I looked at Carol, and her face told me everything I needed to know. "Oh God," I whispered. She really thought I didn't love her?" "She knew you loved her," Carol said quickly. "But she wondered if she'd somehow failed you. If there was something she should have done differently." I felt like the ground was disappearing under my feet. I need to go inside. I need to see her." Richard stepped in front of me.
No.
"Richard, please." I said no. "You've done enough damage. You want to mourn her? Do it somewhere else." That's when I completely lost it. She was my mother. I screamed. "I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what legal right you think you have. She was my mother, and I am going to that funeral." I tried to push past him, and he actually physically blocked me, put his hands on my shoulders, and shoved me backward. "Get off of me," I yelled, and that's when things got really ugly. Two of the men from the church, guys I didn't recognize, stepped forward and flanked Richard. Like they were prepared for this. Like he'd warned them I might cause trouble. "Miss, you need to leave," one of them said. "You're disrupting a funeral. I'm her daughter. I have every right to be here. Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave the premises, or we'll call the police." I looked around at the crowd that had gathered. Family members, family friends, people who'd known me since I was a child. And they were all just watching.
Not one of them stood up for me.
Not one of them said, "Wait, this is wrong." Except Carol. Bless her, Carol tried. "This is ridiculous," she said, stepping forward. "This is Janet's daughter. She belongs here as much as anyone." "Carol, stay out of this," Richard said. "This is between me and her." "No, it's not. It's a funeral, not a family therapy session. You're making a scene at your wife's funeral because you want to punish a grieving daughter. Janet would be horrified." For a moment, I thought she'd gotten through to him. Richard's face softened slightly, and he looked uncertain. But then he shook his head. "Janet died of a broken heart because her daughter abandoned her. I'm not letting her turn this into another opportunity to make everything about herself." The church guys were closing in on me now, clearly prepared to physically escort me off the property. "Fine," I said, backing toward my car.
"Fine.
But this isn't over, Richard. This will never be over." I sat in my car in the church parking lot for the entire funeral, watching people come and go. watching them carry my mother's casket out to the hearse, watching the procession drive away to the cemetery that I wasn't welcome at. Carol came over to my car afterward, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry, honey," she said through my window. "That was wrong. That was so wrong." "Was he right?" I asked her. Did she really think I didn't love her? Carol was quiet for a long time. "Your mom loved you so much," she said finally. "But Richard, he had a way of getting in her head, especially after that Christmas fight. He'd make these comments about how you were too busy to visit, how you were outgrowing your family. And instead of defending you, she'd start wondering if maybe he was right. Why didn't she talk to me? Why didn't she just ask me directly? Because she was proud. And because she was scared. She was scared that if she pushed too hard, she'd lose you completely. So, instead, she just let Richard convince her that she'd already lost me?
It was more complicated than that.
But yeah, essentially. I started crying again. I should have seen it. I should have known what he was doing. How could you have known? You were living your life. That's what children are supposed to do. But I could have tried harder. I could have been more present. You could have. But you were also dealing with a step-parent who was undermining your relationship with your mother from day one. This isn't all on you, sweetie. After Carol left, I drove to the cemetery. I figured I could at least see where they'd buried her, maybe say a few words when everyone else was gone. But when I got there, Richard was still there, standing by the fresh grave with a few other people I didn't recognize. I parked at a distance and waited. Eventually, everyone else left, but Richard stayed. He just stood there by the grave for what felt like hours. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I got out of my car and walked over. "Richard," I said softly. He turned around, and I was shocked by how he looked. In the span of a week, he seemed to have aged years. His eyes were red and swollen, his face was gaunt, and he was shaking slightly. "What are you doing here?" he asked, but there was no fight left in his voice. I needed to see where she was buried. I needed to say goodbye. We stood there in silence for a few minutes, both looking down at the fresh dirt and the flowers that people had left. "She talked about you every day," he said suddenly. "Even when she was hurt, even when she was wondering what she'd done wrong, she talked about you every day. Richard, she was so proud of you. Your job, your engagement, the life you'd built. She'd show pictures to anyone who would look. She'd talk about how smart you were, how independent, how you'd never needed anyone to take care of you. I needed her," I whispered. "I always needed her. She didn't know that. Because you never told her. Because you never asked for help, never asked for advice, never let her feel like she was still your mom. I didn't know how. After that fight, after you said all those things about me being selfish and taking her for granted, I was trying to be better. I was trying to be less needy." He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time in 2 years. "Jesus," he said quietly. "What did we do to each other?" The truth. That's when the whole story came out. Richard told me that my mom had been having chest pains and shortness of breath for months, but she'd been hiding it because she didn't want to worry me during wedding planning. When she finally went to a doctor, they found significant heart disease and told her she needed surgery. But she kept putting it off. First, because she didn't want to miss my engagement party, the one Richard didn't attend. Then, because she didn't want to be recovering during the holidays. Then because she wanted to wait until after my wedding in the spring. "I begged her to call you," Richard said. "I told her you'd want to know, that you'd want to help. But she said you were stressed enough about the wedding, and she didn't want to add to it." "Why didn't you call me?" "Because she made me promise not to. She said if I went behind her back and told you, she'd never forgive me." So my mom spent her last months dealing with serious health issues, afraid to tell me because she thought I was too busy to care. And Richard spent those same months watching his wife literally worry herself to death over a relationship that he'd helped poison with his resentments and accusations. "The night she died," he continued, "we'd been talking about you. She'd gotten the save the date for your wedding in the mail, and she was so excited. But then she started crying because she was convinced you'd only invited her out of obligation, that you didn't really want her there." "That's insane. Of course I wanted her there. I was going to ask her to help me pick out my dress. I was going to ask her to do a reading during the ceremony. Were you really?
Or are you just saying that now?
And that was the question, wasn't it? I'd been planning to include her more in wedding stuff, but I kept putting it off because things had been weird between us. I kept waiting for the right time to reach out, to have a real conversation, to clear the air. But the right time never came. I don't know, I admitted. I was going to. I wanted to. But I kept waiting for things to feel normal between us again. Things were never going to feel normal as long as we were both waiting for the other person to make the first move. We talked for another hour by her grave. Richard apologized for the things he'd said that Christmas, and I apologized for shutting him out afterward. We both apologized for putting my mom in the middle of our conflict. But apologies don't bring people back to life. The funeral was 3 weeks ago. Richard and I have been trying to figure out how to move forward, but it's complicated. He's been going through my mom's things and found a journal she'd been keeping for the past few years. He asked if I wanted to read it, but I'm honestly terrified of what I might find. What if it's full of entries about how disappointed she was in me? What if she wrote about feeling abandoned by me? What if her last entry is about how she wished things were different between us? But what if it's not? What if it's full of love and pride and worry for my happiness? What if reading it would help me understand that her death wasn't actually my fault? I don't know if I'm strong enough to find out either way. Richard has also been dealing with guilt. He's realized that his need to be the man of the house and his resentment about my relationship with my mom contributed to the distance between us. He's been seeing a therapist and has suggested family counseling, which feels weird since we're not technically family anymore, but maybe it would help. The worst part is the wedding planning. Mike and I were supposed to get married in 2 months, and I can't even think about it without falling apart. How do I plan a wedding celebration when my mom died thinking I didn't want her there? How do I walk down an aisle without her? How do I dance to our song when she'll never hear it? Mike has been incredibly supportive and has suggested postponing, but I don't know if that's the right answer either. Maybe postponing is just another way of avoiding dealing with things. So Reddit, I need advice. Here's where I am. My mom is dead, and both Richard and I contributed to her final years being filled with unnecessary worry and sadness. Neither of us intended for that to happen, but intentions don't really matter when someone's gone. Richard wants to build a relationship with me now. He says my mom would have wanted that, and he's probably right. But I'm having trouble getting past the fact that he tried to ban me from her funeral. I understand that he was grieving and angry, but that was one of the most devastating experiences of my life, and I don't know if I can forgive it. At the same time, he's the only person left who shared those 12 years with my mom. He's the only one who can tell me about her last months, her last days, her last words. If I cut him out of my life, I lose that connection to her forever. I also don't know how to process my own guilt. I wasn't a perfect daughter, and I did prioritize my own life over staying closely connected with my mom. But I was also a 28-year-old woman trying to build a career and plan a wedding. Is it reasonable to expect that I should have been calling every day, visiting every weekend, including her in every decision? Or was Richard right that Christmas night? Was I selfish? Did I take her for granted? And what about the wedding? Do I postpone it? Do I go through with it? Do I include some kind of memorial for my mom, or would that just make everyone sad? I feel like I'm drowning in guilt and grief and regret, and I don't know which way is up anymore. Has anyone dealt with anything like this? How do you move forward when the relationship you most wanted to repair is now impossible to fix? How do you forgive yourself for mistakes you can't undo? And how do you decide whether to maintain a relationship with someone who caused you tremendous pain during an already unbearable time? I know this was incredibly long, but I needed to get the whole story out. Thanks for reading, and thanks for any advice you can offer. Update, added 2 hours later. Holy shit, this blew up. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read and respond. I'm trying to get through all the comments, but there are a few things I want to clarify based on questions people are asking. About the journal, several people have said I should read it. You're probably right, but I'm genuinely terrified. Richard offered to read it first and just tell me the general gist, but that feels like cheating somehow. About Richard, a lot of people are asking if his behavior was abusive toward my mom. Looking back, I think he was manipulative, but I don't think it was intentionally malicious. I think he genuinely felt threatened by my relationship with my mom and dealt with it in a really unhealthy way. That doesn't excuse it, but it helps me understand it. About the funeral, some people are saying I should have pushed harder, maybe called the police or gotten a court order. Maybe you're right, but in the moment, I just couldn't handle making an even bigger scene. I was already devastated, and the idea of involving law enforcement at my mom's funeral felt like it would have made everything worse. About the wedding, Mike and I have decided to postpone until the fall. It just doesn't feel right to celebrate right now, and I need time to figure out how to honor my mom's memory as part of the ceremony.
Keep the advice coming.
I'm reading everything, even if I can't respond to it all. Edit 2. Added 6 hours later. I did it. I called Richard and asked if I could come over and read the journal. I'm going over there tomorrow morning. I'm terrified, but you're all right. I need to know what she was really thinking and feeling. I owe it to her, and I owe it to myself. I'll update again after I've had time to process whatever I find. Wish me luck.